What do you think is worse? Living a life where you stay captive to your internal negative narratives about who you are and what's possible? Or living a life that's comfortable and good, but yet dealing with the silent internal pain of knowing there's more to you, in you, and for you? They both are not ideal, but many women, including myself, find themselves somewhere in between the two. I will never forget this pivotal story about my oldest son. He was around 8 years old at the time, and this story has remained a learning lesson for me in all of these years. He was 8 years old. I was baking cookies for my family. The cookies were done, so I was walking down the hallway to the kitchen to get the cookies, and then out of nowhere, my little son jumped out. He was decked out in his soldier outfit. He had his soldier helmet on, he had his soldier cape on, and a sword, and he jumped out with his sword up and he said, "Who are you? And why are you here?" And I just sort of laughed at him and said, "Oh, you're so cute, Mr. Soldier." So I stepped to the side to go around him, and then he stepped in front of me, and he held his sword up a little higher with a little bit more bass in his voice, and he said, "I said, who are you? And why are you here?" And again, I just said, "Oh, don't hurt me, Mr. Soldier." So I tried to step around him and go around. And this time, with all the bass in his little 8-year-old voice, he lifted up his sword much higher. He said, "I said, who are you and why are you here?" And in that moment, there was a shift. In that moment, it felt different. It didn't have the same playful and childish undertone as the first 2 times he asked me that question. It was a drastic shift from the former energy. The question became a moment of deep inner reflection for me. It felt like I stayed glued in that moment, pondering and thinking about the questions that my son asked me. I was stuck. I couldn't answer the question of who I was and why I was here. Beyond being a mother, a wife, and a few other titles, I couldn't give a thoughtful, insightful, meaningful answer. If anything, I was quickly able to state the opposite, who I wasn't and what I couldn't do, which were all centered around these negative and limited beliefs that I had about myself. So who you are and why you're here are all based on what you believe about yourself, what you have accepted to be true. And many times our beliefs are deficit-based instead of asset-based. So, unbeknownst to my son, that question he asked me was the catalyst for me to go on a journey of understanding more deeply and more richly who I am and why I'm here. But I realized that I could never have gotten there because I had too many limiting beliefs about myself that were keeping me stuck, stagnant, and circling. So I had to first do the work to conquer those limiting beliefs so that I could be more confident in knowing who I am and why I'm here. So today, I'm sharing with you the 3 mindset shifts that will allow you to show up and be more fully the person that you're meant to be. The first mindset shift is you gotta break free from that SOB. Yep, you heard me right. Break free from that SOB. All they do is hold you back and steal your joy and your peace. Believe me, I've had my fair share of them. Now, I don't know what kind of SOB you're thinking, but when I say SOB, it's a term that I've coined that stands for self-sabotaging oppressive beliefs. Okay, now that we've cleared that up, what are some of your SOBs, your self-sabotaging beliefs that you have about yourself? What negative and limiting beliefs are you carrying regarding who you are and what's available to you and for you? What beliefs do you have about your life, your circumstances, and what's possible? What are those negative subconscious thoughts that you're not even consciously aware of? Those limiting and sabotaging beliefs can make us believe that we aren't qualified for something, that we're not good enough, that you aren't capable or able, that you don't have the confidence to do something or be something, that other people are just better, and to just be content with what you have because you probably won't or can't achieve the thing that you really desire. Also, those beliefs will have us thinking that it doesn't get any better for you, so you just need to accept where you're at. Also, it'll have you believing that everyone else's life is amazing except yours. Those are the SOBs, and you have to break free from the SOB that's robbing and stealing from you. Most of the time, we are on autopilot. We don't even recognize those SOBs that we carry around. They become ingrained in us, and we become subconsciously comfortable in our chaos. What are we really believing about ourselves? You know, I love that proverb that reminds us, so a man or a woman thinks, so is he. So what are you thinking? What are you believing about you? And how true is this statement from an article that I was reading by a neuroscientist, Dr. Rick Hansen? He says the brain is like Velcro for negative experiences, but Teflon for positive ones. How true is that? Research also shows that the subconscious mind controls 95% of our life, controlling every little thing we do regarding the way we think, how we feel, our habits, and patterns and beliefs in life. The subconscious mind's primary primary function is to obey the commands and instructions given by the conscious mind. Its job is to prove whatever the conscious mind believes is true. There are so many subconscious beliefs that we often are not even consciously aware of. I was reading a research article around the question of, does your brain distinguish real from imaginary? Let me tell you about this fascinating study. So there were these 3 groups. The first group, the research participants were asked to play a simple sequence of piano notes each day for 5 consecutive days, and their brains were scanned each day after they played. Another group of participants were asked to imagine playing the notes. They didn't actually play the notes physically, they just imagined playing the notes. And their brains were scanned daily for 5 days as well. Then there was the control group. They didn't play or imagine, they were just there. So when the researchers compared the images of the 2 main groups, the brain scans from the group that imagined they played the piano notes were identical to the scans of those who actually physically played the notes. So both groups had the same brain activity. So let's go back to the original question. Does the brain distinguish real from imaginary? The answer is no. Our brains do not distinguish between real and imaginary. The same brain chemistry is produced regardless if the activity is real or imagined. So what does this have to do with anything? It has everything to do with everything. This means that what we imagine, what we constantly think on, what we constantly ruminate over and over, what we constantly replay and rehash in our heads, what we believe, what we accept to be true, what we have created to be true, and what we believe is happening to us is actually happening as far as our brain is concerned. So therefore, what you think to be true, all those SOBs, those sabotaging, oppressive beliefs are true according to your brain. Our thoughts and beliefs are powerful. It's important to become more aware of our subconscious thoughts. They give life and energy and sustenance to who we are and produce our outcomes in life. Too much is at stake. You can't afford to not break free from that SOB. The second mindset shift that will allow you to show up more fully as the person you're meant to be is getting clarity around the question of, who told you that? And what I mean is, who told you that negative SOB message, that negative self-sabotaging oppressive belief that you've come to believe about yourself, that limiting narrative that you keep replaying over and over? So after you identify the SOB in your life, you have to trace the origin. It's hard to detach from it if you can't identify the root. You gotta cut it at the root. So it's important to identify who told you that, whatever your that is. It's hard to fight a battle when you don't even know where the attack is coming from. So let me share a personal story with you. One of my SOBs for the longest time from childhood has been the self-sabotaging oppressive belief that I'm not equipped to do something, that I wasn't capable of doing something. And it was all rooted in fear. So later in my adult life, after I realized I wasn't living up to my greatest potential, because I would always figure out a way to self-sabotage a plan and not move forward with something that I really wanted to do, that I dreamed about doing, I got pretty annoyed that I was doing myself a disservice and really doing the world a disservice. So I had to get to the root of who told me that I couldn't do something. Who told me that? And after going down memory lane and realizing I had some unprocessed healing to do, I figured out who told me. As much as he loved me and did his best, my dad lived by a play it safe and play it small mentality. My dad was projecting his fears on his children by constantly saying things like, oh, I don't think that would work. Do this smaller thing instead. Oh, you can't do that, but do this other option instead, this safer option. Why try that? Do this other thing instead. So the subconscious message that was received and believed by me was not to even attempt to do the big things in life because I couldn't, and instead settle for the smaller and the safer options. So while he thought he was protecting and helping me, he was really hindering and planting seeds of doubt that would eventually take root. So it's important to be able to answer the question, who told you that? And it may not even be a specific person. It could be society, it could be the culture that you live in, it could be something generational. For me, this whole idea of who told you that stems from the story of Adam and Eve, who were living the life in the garden until they were deceived by the serpent and ate the fruit they were asked not to. Then God came into the garden and called out for them and asked where they were, as if he didn't know. And so Adam called out and said that they were hiding behind the leaves. And God asked, why? As if he didn't know. And Adam sheepishly responded, because we're naked. To which God then said, who told you that? So they went from loving life, enjoying it, being carefree, to now hiding with guilt and shame. And they only knew they were naked because they believed the lies of the enemy. So it's important to know Who told you the false things about yourself that you've come to believe? The third mindset shift that will allow you to show up more fully as the person you were meant to be is talk to yourself. You have to become more aware of what you say to you about you. The first two mindset shifts were all about what others have said about you that you've come to believe about yourself. But the only way we step into the greatness that awaits us and is prepared for us is when we stop listening to ourselves and start talking to ourselves. We have to change the narrative that you've been reciting about yourself. Reframe the storyline. Tell yourself what you want to believe. Life and death are in the power of the tongue, and we will have what we say we have. While we can sometimes give way too much energy and thought into what others say about us, the most important and powerful voice is what you say to you about you. So what is it that you want to believe? What is it that you want to be true for you, regardless if you currently have it now or if you can actually see it now? Because your current situation is not your final destination, or at least it doesn't have to be. Our brain is a creature of habit and repetition, so we need to be in the habit of repeating all the wonderful things about who we are and what's possible and what's available to us. So back to that original question that my son asked me, who are you and why are you here? It all begins with a thought, how you see yourself and what you are believing about yourself. Henry Ford said it best, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.